This was the UK's cheapest Nissan 350Z, and it has already undergone quite the transformation. The first thing that I did was took out that horrible oily stained headlining, relined that, as well as covering the steering wheel with a nice suede cover. Once that was done, it was separating the headlights, painting the inside black and restoring those headlight lenses. Once they were back on the car, we got onto the oil pan, that needed replacing, and the new one went on, which was where we finished the last video. So let's get straight back into it and get that gearbox back on. So the first thing to go back on the car is the flywheel, and it does have to go on in a particular way, otherwise it won't send the right signal and the engine won't start. Trust me, I have done it before, and once you've got the gearbox back on and you have to then take it all back off, it's a real pain. So next up is the clutch disc and the pressure plate, and once that's on and torqued back down, then I can look to start offering up the gearbox. So this is a really heavy gearbox. I think it weighs something like 50 kilos, and see when I move my fat head out the way, there's a little sort of red clip that I've put in place, and that's just to help kind of keep the gearbox steady, because when you put it on the gearbox jack, it just wants to fall off. And again, I didn't really fancy it hitting me, and it just made it a little bit easier to keep it level so that I could offer it up. And as soon as I could get the spigot to sort of sit in place, I could then look at getting some bolts in. And I didn't really want to use the bolts to tighten and pull the gearbox into the engine, but sort of hold them in place so that I could wiggle things around to get it to seat properly was ideal. And then I knew I was home and dry on the gearbox. Next up was the rear bracket that mounts to the chassis, which holds the gearbox in place, and that was 4 bolts to either side. They were pretty easy to get in, and then I could lower the jack stand out the way. Up next is just connecting the gear linkage, which is a 12mm nut that connects on, and then that tightens up inside the car, which will allow me to put all of the bracketry back inside once I'm done underneath. And then we can connect up all of the connectors, the 2 cats, the O2 sensors for the cats, and all of the other wiring harness that goes around the gearbox, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's all color-coded and they only go in one particular place, so you can't really get that one wrong. In comes the prop shaft, which slides into the back of the gearbox and mounts up to the rear diff, and it's held together by 4 17mm bolts and nuts, and making sure that the handbrake is not on and that the car is not in gear will allow me to turn it and make sure I can get them all tightened down to spec as well. Everything under the car is back on, even the old wide pipe or centre pipe at the moment, just until the new one arrives, because I've got to move the car later. All of the wires and connectors are all connected back up. I've got the slave cylinder down here, the starter motor back in on the other side that goes into the gearbox too. I've got to put the front kidney brace back on. I've also taken out the little sort of brace that goes up and over the prop shaft around the back and into those new arms. I've been this morning and collected those new rear subframe stays, and just look at the difference between the new and the old. We'll go ahead and throw them on now, then I can get the rear W brace on, then I can get the front kidney brace on, then I can lower the car down, put some coolant in, bleed it through, then I can move the car, which is really what I need to do today. So let's crack on with that now. Right, everything is now back together, so the last thing to do is to top up the coolant from what we took out before, bleed the system, get the engine running and make sure everything is okay, there's no leaks. And then I'm going to take the car out for a run and hopefully everything is good and we shouldn't have any more problems. The W braces on the back, the front kidney braces back on as well, everything's been torqued down, so let's get this coolant topped up and go from there. Now I will say that this car did prove to be one of the more difficult ones to get it to bleed through naturally, but we got there eventually, so I'm happy and the blowers are now blowing through hot. And now that the car is back down on the ground and I've got it running, we can take a little look. I need to take it out for a drive now that the coolant has all been bled through, got it running up to temperature and the blowers are coming through hot. Let's take a little look at the car back down on the ground. Now it's obviously filthy, but it's running smooth. You can still hear the exhaust blow. The front kidney brace under there has been put back on. I painted that white and that's looking lovely and tidy, as is the new W brace is white, a bit difficult to see, and those new rear suspension arms. I've got new discs and pads coming. I'm going to get the wheels refurbed. I've also still got to work out what I'm going to do with this rust here and look potentially at having the bodywork wrapped. I need to also continue to realign the petrol filler cap. We've still got the clutch slave and master cylinder to do. The headlights are looking way better already, but let's go take it for a drive and let's see how it drives and if all is as it should be. So the first thing I can hear is there's still that horrible blow from the mid pipe. That's still got to be replaced, but it's not arrived yet. Next up is obviously the suspension, or I say the suspension. The rear of the car's had a bit of an overhaul with those rear subframe support arms, and thankfully I haven't got to worry about the rusted old ones dropping through and letting the subframe fall through the car. So far so good. Now I'm only just about pulling out of the estate that I live on, so it won't be until I get out on the road that I really know. But I've also done the I've had pretty much the majority of the front end of the car off. Everything's been down and supported by that engine support bar, so it's going to be a great opportunity to make sure everything feels pretty good. So far so good, no horrible noises, no knocks, no bangs. Temperatures are looking good, there's no lights on the dash. So I would say we've done a pretty good repair job so far. Now we need to get the car back and we need to get those brakes on. So it turns out, after all, we're not done with the Nissan. I'm covered in it. I made a stupid error when I put everything back together. There was the power cable for the battery for the positive terminal. It was in some plastic conduit, which should be attached to the turret on the engine side where the suspension is, and I didn't put that back in place. And that was resting up against the exhaust manifold, and as it got hot, it melted through that cable and effectively melted through the cable itself into the exhaust manifold, which has shorted it out and effectively cut the engine. So now I've managed to get it running again. I had to pump start the car to get it going, and now I'm almost home, so I can get the car jack back up, the airbox out, and I can replace that cable. It's just another expense, but hey,
it is what it is, and this is why we go and we test drive stuff once we've done a load of work and make sure everything's okay. And in this instance, unfortunately, it wasn't. But I'll get back, get it jacked up, and
one heck of a morning then on the first test drive. So obviously we took it out, and there was smoke coming from under the bonnet. Turns out that what I'd actually done was fried the terminal on the battery, so I've had to replace that, and the culprit has been this cable from the battery to the starter motor has just melted its way through. And what happened was it was touching on the exhaust manifold down inside here. I didn't actually reattach it to the bracket, so that was my fault. So I've had to put a new battery in, which I've just been and collected from Halfords. I've had a new cable made up for me for the starter motor. Adam at Stafford Tow Bars and Auto Electrics really came through with that. 14 quid for a new one just to be made up. I can't really gripe and argue with that. So thank you very much to those guys for sorting me out. Let's get them on the car, and then hopefully everything starts and runs perfectly fine. We can go back out, make sure everything else is good. But so far from the first drive, apart from that, everything was okay. So let's get that on, get everything back together, drop the car back down, and go and take it for another run.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up.
And here we go then, a silly little repair job that I've had to do. It's just one of those, kind of a pain in the backside really, but it is what it is. It's done now, and I guess the positive to take out of it is we've got a brand new cable running from the battery to the starter motor. I don't know why that would make a difference, but hey, every cloud.
They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be fucking sour, take a cold shower, scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder, and all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it.
All right, test drive, take 2. Hopefully, no issues this time. There's always something, eh? All right, so I'm just going to pull out of my estate again, and hopefully this time we don't break down, we don't cut out, and we don't burn through any starter motor cables.
Sometimes I feel like all is lost, but I know it's not true. I want to put up all my walls cause I'm not in the mood, but then I cut myself off from the rest of the room. I know that time can heal it all if you're patient and soon it can all be worth it, all the searching. Pain is never really permanent, but damn it hurts, man. I could feel all of the turbulence and it's concerning. I've been searching for a purpose, I hope it's worth it. This society is really trying me. Ain't no hide and seek, I hide to be far from anxiety.
I'm going to class that as a win and a positive test drive, which means now we can start moving on with some of the other stuff. God, please, that's done. Adam at Stafford Tow Bars and Auto Electrics, I love you, mate, today. I'm really, really happy that the car's now back and running. All right, onwards and upwards. And with that part of the project now done, we can move on to something that's also quite as important to get right, and that is the brakes. Now, the discs and pads need changing. I said that before. They're not too bad, actually, and there's a little bit of meat left on the pads. I don't know what brand they are, but the front discs especially are quite heavily lipped, so they do need to be replaced, as well as the front hubs. And I've also got the rear, and you know, they're looking a little bit worse for wearing there in terms of some surface rust, so these are going to need a tidy up too. Now we're going to start with the back of the car, so let's go ahead and get the car spun round onto the drive, jacked up, get them rear wheels off, and then we can do the rear discs and pads. Okay, so in terms of discs and pads, what I've done is I've been and bought a complete front and rear set from MTEC Brakes. I bought them online. I went for slotted and grooved all the way around, and they're standard MTEC brakes, which are effectively the equivalent of Brembo. So they're a decent quality. I actually paid 300 and something quid for the set, which I was really pleased at, because it ultimately ended up being almost like 200 quid cheaper than if I went and did the lot from Euro Car Parts. So I'm going to get those hooked on now, and then hopefully the car should start looking a little bit nicer too. We've got, you know, pretty much everything underneath done apart from that mid pipe. So once the discs and pads are on, we really can start finishing off things inside the car. I've still got that little surprise that I was going to do for the interior for the head unit. That's to come. But let's go ahead. Let's get these on the car now. So a nice simple job now for a change, and once I've got the wheel spacers off, I can then knock on the disc that's obviously sat there for a while. The handbrake is off, so it should come away relatively easy. Clean up the mating surface and get the new disc on, and once the caliper's back in place, I can then slide the pads in from the other side. So if it's a case of replacing pads in future, the rear caliper won't have to come off. It'll just be a case of taking the retaining pins out, and then you can replace the pads. Really quite simple. Once this side was done, same on the other, then I can move to the front. Finally, we're going to make our way around to the driver's side front, and it's the last disc pad and the last bearing. And one thing that I didn't realise about the bearings was that there's actually only one particular way it goes in. So whilst they look like they'll fit in sort of, well, at least sort of that way or that way, they actually are pretty precisely made to fit only one particular way. I was getting a little worried at first, thinking that they weren't going to fit, but they do, and they're on. The passenger side is all back together. I actually think they look really quite nice in there. Obviously the calipers do need doing, the wheels need a refurb, but we'll get to that. So let's get set up on the driver's side front here. So the only difference when it came to the front was there's a hard line that goes into the caliper for the brake fluid, and I didn't want to bend it or move it or have to take off any of the other brackets. So it was a case of just manipulating and working that disc out so that I could keep the bolts holding the caliper in and then get the disc out. Once that was out, I could knock the wheel bearing out, clean up the surface, and I put a little bit of copper grease behind the new one before it went in, and then I used the bolts to help pull it back in evenly and going in a crisscross pattern just to make sure I'd evenly tightened the new wheel bearing. And they're only 4 17mm nuts. They were relatively easy to access as well. There was no difficult spots to get to as long as you use a deep 17mm socket. And that is another job done on the Nissan. Just check out those new discs in there. I think they look great. I think they really set that wheel arch off. Obviously the wheels need cleaning and tidying up, but I really think that sets it off. It's the same for the back of the car as well, in the new discs, and sat in there really nice, and it's got rid of all of that horrible rusted surface. So that's going to be the end of today's video there, guys, and I want to say a huge thank you to everybody in this particular video that has helped me out. We've got Adam from Stafford Tow Bar and Auto Electrics, the guys at MTEC Brakes as well. You've all really come through and helped me, and whilst they've not sponsored the video, I have paid for everything that that I bought from them. I do want to say a big thank you to them, because without them doing what they do, I wouldn't have had the parts I needed for the car. Now I have got the new mid pipe has arrived for the exhaust, so we can repair that and get rid of that horrible blow. It's also come with new bolts and gaskets, so I can press out the old ones, but that's going to have to wait until the next video. I've got to go. I'm on my way to go and pick up a brand new car for the channel, and maybe you guys can guess what it is. I may have even given it away a little earlier, but you will find out very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. We really want to get this channel to over 1,000 subscribers now, so that I can continue to bring more and more content to you guys on a more regular basis. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.